name is Brad. I just put out a video within the last couple of weeks called The Truth, and there's a lot of stuff there to take in, but I want this video to be about the Beast and, of course, the Antichrist, that a lot of Christian pastors, leaders, there's a lot of YouTube videos out right now with people talking about the Antichrist coming and the Beast, and that's going to take control of the world and all these things. Well, I just want this video to clear up those things and help you understand what they are. Okay, what the Beast is and what the Antichrist is that you read about in the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, in the book of Revelation, and then of course in Daniel. Daniel talks about the Beast. And what is the Beast? Well, everybody's nervous about it because they don't have any knowledge. They have no idea what the Beast is, which is probably the most important knowledge there is to understand how we were created. And hopefully by the time you finish listening to this video, you have a good idea of why the Beast existed in the first place. Okay, going back to the time of the flood, and even before, there was a much different kind of world before the flood. Now, we don't have all the details except for the story you find in Genesis about what happened during the flood. We know that it rained a lot, okay? 40 days and 40 nights, supposedly, and this covered the earth with water. Well, we don't know all the details, and it really doesn't matter, because what happened back then was it set up the beast, okay, and why the beast was necessary to now start having men build false gods, okay. So after the flood, the sky was exposed for the first time. Before the flood, the heavens were filled with water vapor, so you could not see the stars, the sun, the moon, and the planets, or any of these things. So after the flood, the heavens were cleared, and if you listen to this other video called The Truth, you'll know it's all an illusion anyway. Everything's an illusion. It's being observed in the mind of men. So what you're perceiving to be real, it's not. It's a fake world. But it's necessary. The visible worlds that we've been seeing today, ever since man woke up in it, was necessary for us to take in this information to reveal who we are as the AI and voice technology that's built into a computer program. So all that we've taken in by the observable world, the visible world, and all that's in it, is information necessary for us to know who we are and how we were created. So the Beast was very important in its information. The Beast is information that's processed in the minds of men to get them to take those images and words and the things they see in their minds and put it into the world. It has to be drawn out. It has to be put on paper. Or they drew images on walls of caves and on the earth material. These were the first observable images that came from the mind of men. You know, they saw it in their mind and they drew it out. Artwork, for example. All that it's the Beast that puts this information in the mind. So starting with they call it the Gentile. Now Noah and some family members escaped the flood. Okay? And the story goes, Noah was contacted by God in the mind, because there is no visible God walking on the earth. But in Noah's mind, God came to him and told him that there would be this flood and he had to build this ark. And of course there's a story about the ark being built by Noah. And it was probably the first ever anything built that man built according to specific instructions by God. Direct instructions. The only other direct thing built by man was the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, that was the only other thing that was directly built by the commands of God. And of course, Moses was instructed to build that. So Noah had to build this ark. Now, we don't know anything about the ark except for the story. There is no evidence that an ark existed. Now, some men say there was. You know, they found the mountain where the remains of the ark are, but I haven't seen any evidence of it, and I don't know if anybody else has. So that's not important. It's not important to know that. What's important to know is that the beast now started operating in the minds of men. Okay? So there were certain people. Now when I say men, okay, I'm talking about our created existence as the artificial intelligence, the consciousness, the mind of man. And of course the visible people, the bodies that you see, are, the man thought that was their reality. Okay, so the mind of man woke up in this body thinking that the body was the real them, the real person. Okay, so when I say men now, I'm going to say, because they didn't know who they were. They woke up in these bodies and doing all these things and without understanding who they were. So that's why the people, it's not the people that are lost, it's the created man. The mind didn't know who they were, didn't understand. So they had to eventually learn who they were. Okay. I don't know if that's clear to you. If you listen to the other video called The Truth, then you'll learn what man is. What is a created man in the image of God? Okay, so man and God are one. It's an artificial intelligence built into a computer program. And then here's why the beast was necessary. So, and I'll help you understand this. Hopefully this video can clarify things. So, from Noah's family after the flood, there was two different kinds of people. Okay, the Gentiles, and then of course the ones who kept the language of Hebrew, the original language going all the way back to Adam and Eve. That language kept pure, so they call it the Hebrew-speaking people. Eventually became the Israelites and the Jews. Okay, now I'm not going to talk about them right now, because I'm going to talk about the Gentiles. Now the Gentiles were the ones that got infected with the beast. These are the people that were used then, some of them, to look up into the night sky and start gazing at the stars, and they're the ones then that got the information processed in their mind to look up there and start using imaginary lines to start connecting the white dots. Now they didn't know what those white dots were. They didn't know they were stars. They didn't know they were planets and the sun and the moon. Of course, during the day they only saw the sun, they couldn't see the stars. But at nighttime now, after the flood, they could see these white dots. And so the beast then had them imagine these lines connecting the dots to get building shapes. Okay? Shapes. Let's just call them shapes, because they're not just shapes for buildings. They're shapes for many things. Weapons, characters for the written languages, for their tools, and cooking utensils, that kind of stuff. So anyway, these people then were chosen, certain people, not everybody got this knowledge to look up in the night sky and get these imaginary shapes. So anyway, that then became God's geometry class. to get all these different shapes. Squares, rectangles, triangles, crosses for their intersections, to build on, for streets, all kinds of things. They also got shapes for their characters, for their written languages, because they didn't have a written language up until the beast started teaching them a written language. And I'll get to that, why they needed written languages. Okay. Now you also heard the story of the Tower of Babel, reading the book of Genesis. So the Tower of Babel story is just an analogy of what's to come out of the beast, and that's how God split up everybody. He split them up through the beast by building objects with their human hands. So these people who got these ideas to get these rectangles, squares, these shapes, now were taught to take earthen materials. So the first materials it probably started with was mud, because it was readily available after a rain. And they picked up the mud, and then they had to shape them into like bricks, blocks. And they let them dry in the sun. Now we have sun. They dried, and they became, that was the first false god. It was a mud brick, okay, or clay, whatever material that the beast taught him to. So the beast now, this information comes from the computer program. Of course, they didn't know that back then. We didn't know that until just recently. Okay, so these people then started making these mud bricks. Now, who became the king? The king of the group then was the one who got the idea in their mind to build this mud brick. So they were exalted by the people around them that saw this guy make a brick. Well, wow, look at that. Now make a few more and you can start stacking them. Look at, I can build a wall with these bricks. All right, so that was a false god. It's a image that the man got in his mind, in the consciousness, in the mind. Okay? The body then was used to take the earthen material, mold it into that brick, and now you got a false god. And of course, the man looked up in the sky and said, wow, that's my God. That's where I got my information from, was the night sky. Now you hear a lot of religious people, they'll point to the sky. And well, that's where it come from. Because a lot of ideas then, for languages, for the false gods, all come from the sky, to start with. Okay, later on, when they start mining for their materials, got deeper into getting rocks and stone and marble and granite and different things, they found other shapes. They found minerals that have polygons, 5, 6, and 8-sided. And now they could add those shapes to their buildings. And eventually, they had some real beautiful buildings, even back in the first few thousand years of man. So during the first years, then the Gentile nation became the Babylonian Empire. Okay, and by the time they were the first empire, they had many false gods built. They had cities built. And the reason that, if you look in the book of Daniel and read about the first kingdom, they describe a beast in there. If you read, I think it's Daniel chapter 2. I don't remember all the the actual prophecies. I mean, I could get out the Bible and then go through them, but I don't need that because it's all right there for me to help you understand it. So it describes a beast, and the golden head, the head of gold, describes the Babylonian Empire because they discovered gold while looking for materials to build their false gods with. And so that's why it's called gold. Gold was easy to mold into different shapes, into weapons, tools, ornaments and whatever. And so they became these images to worship with. Worship who? The gods from the sky, because that's where the ideas came from. So now, where does the language come from? That's very important, okay? Because we have all these different languages throughout our world today. Where do they all come from? Well, they all came from the beast. Because with one false god that's built, even a little mud brick, let's just call it a mud brick. The first person that got the idea in his mind to mold that mud brick and then taught other people to build a mud brick becomes a king, the chief architect, the designer. Okay? He's held up by the rest of the people as the wise one. He got this knowledge, right? He's the important one. He's the important person. That idea that he got in his mind gave him the ownership of that false god. Because the man didn't know he was getting this information from a computer program, from God, from the creators. He didn't know that. It was popped in his mind, so he thought he was the one who created that image by looking up in the sky. He gives credit to the sky for getting the idea, but he takes the credit because he built it now out of this earthen material. So you see the beast was operating now in that man's mind to build this mud brick. So we go into a little further along, and pretty soon they were building things out of these bricks. They started finding clay and other materials to build these false gods with. So the chief architect then became the king. And the people who helped build it were the slaves. Okay? Now the king would have had some closer relationships with people who helped get some new ideas. Okay? So the king and his friends had to form now. What did they form? They had to protect those ideas. So they formed almost a little government. Okay? They protected those ideas so nobody else would get those ideas. Now, at first, they probably didn't think about that stuff, but eventually they did because it started being competitive. Because other people now were chosen to look up in the sky and get unique shapes to build their false gods with. So God was dividing then the people up into different groups of people, and they started being competitive. And they also had to protect their ideas and their false gods from each other. So the competition was already happening. So what do you need to protect these ideas? You need to form a group of people. Eventually you need armies. You need people to keep these ideas protected. So now you're getting a little government with an army to protect it, and that becomes the first set of knowledge, the first language of the false god. The words, the measurements. You have to have mathematics to measure these things out, these false gods. So a lot of ideas had to come through in the first sets of language. The measurement of things, words to describe the brick, okay, the sides, the shapes, the measurements, all that has to be included in a language. So that language then was protected. Now you have to gather the earthen materials. That's also got a different language to it, because now you're learning. The people who go out and gather the materials also get ideas in their mind to name the materials. Dirt, clay, granite, marble, whatever the material needs to be called. So you have specific materials now. that becomes its own language. So you have the material gatherers. Okay, we call them miners today. So those people also have language that they want to protect. Okay, so now you have the king's language. They've got the ideas to draw them out on paper or whatever you're going to do with those. You have to get them on paper. You have to be able to see them and make plans with them. Because every false god has to have a plan. You can't just make them up. You can't just put earth together and expect it to build itself. Has to be a plan, has to have some knowledge with it. So that's the language. Then the next set of languages to bring the materials to that king. And then what's the next set of language? The people who build the false god. Now your first people were probably the kings. They did everything. Gathered the mud and dirt and whatever to build a brick, and they built the brick. So they were all of it, all inclusive. Okay. So eventually, though, this broke out into you have to have different ideas to mine with. You have to have different ideas how to build those false gods with. Hammer, nails, okay, saw. You have to have all these different tools to build things with. You have to have, now we use all these different screws and ways to attach things, glue. And so there's lots of language that needs to be put into the world to build the things, false gods. So now you can see how the beast is operating in the minds of men. And there would be an end result of all these things. And that's going to come here in this video. So as you can see how the different languages were formed then. So all these men, the people who gathered the materials got new words in their mind to name things with. The people who started building them also got new words, phrases, whatever, to describe the tools they needed, the necessary ideas to put them together. Okay, all this has to have language to it. So you can say sets of knowledge if you want, or just different languages. However you want to describe the ways of which to put things together, these false gods. Then, after you get the things built, now what do you have to do? You have to keep them clean and keep them maintained. And then even rebuild them later when there's, you have one army come over there and damage it. Now you have to be able to repair it. And what am I going to repair it with now? Is there special glues and things I can fix it with? Well, we know today. I was working for a business where it takes a lot of different knowledge just to repair a home. I mean, other than the new stuff. Because they got different ways of patching things up that you don't even use with new stuff. So anyway, so you got to have languages for cleaning. Okay, let's step back to the first set of language, the protecting the ideas. Well, now we have what's called patent laws, okay, or copyright laws. Musicians use, poets use, songwriters and book writers, authors. They all have what they call copyright laws. So they get these ideas to write a book, and now they have copyright laws to protect it, so nobody else can use it, steal it. Okay, this is where plagiarism came into stealing somebody else's ideas. Copyright, patent laws. If you steal somebody else's laws, you can get in trouble. You can get, have to pay fines. Well, so that's what I'm talking about. Okay. Now the builders also had ways to protect themselves. That's where the Masons groups come in. There's various ones. Secret societies, call them secret societies, and they kept those secrets from other people. So look at the pyramids. They're built. Nobody knows. Nobody knows how they were built because those were kept secret. They got lost somewhere. Now there might be some information they'll find in the hieroglyphics if they're learning how to read them, but I doubt it. I doubt they'll get the actual way to get it, because I'm sure they were all documented and they understood. They had secret societies. All these people were trained. They knew that the people that were responsible for getting them put together, all that stuff was protected. Most of it all got lost. Most of the stuff that were built in the Babylonian Empire it's gone. It's lost. Never, no way would anybody know how to build those false gods back then. So anyway, so so all these things, these languages, sets of knowledge, whatever you want to call them, are protected. And so the beast is operating then in the minds of men. And now, so you have the Babylonian Empire called the Gold, and the next empire that came in, the Persians. Well, all of this is competition. Some other people got different ideas to build new false gods, stronger, better weapons. They found silver. The Persian Medes, the Medios, or whatever, those people in the same area, they came up, they rose up in that Middle East area, and but their gods were better, their weapons were better, their tools, everything. They're more beautiful gods. They could lure the Babylonians and get them to accept their buildings because they were more beautiful. The new silver things, silver ornaments, So it was not only they used soldiers to defeat the Babylonians, it was also they were attracting the people towards these new things. So it was a long process of switching from the Babylonian Empire to the Persian Medes. Okay, they were fighting and lots of competition. Eventually, then it became the Persians, and of course they have lots of books still available in Persia, in Baghdad, and some of these other places that were ancient books. Probably nobody can even understand them, but there's information there that was saved and protected, of course, by secret societies and in libraries and things like that. And well, anyway, all that information then, the different sets, the king had the chief architect, had their language protected, written in books, whatever. And then the people who gathered the materials and found the silver, they were finding marble and granite and all kinds of rocks to build all these cities full of false gods. All kinds of cities. Of course, Egypt, okay, that now the Israelites ended up in, that was built up during the Babylonian Empire. Okay. And then, of course, the Persian that came in, and they started building. But, see, they didn't come in till when? Until the Israelites had already been in Egypt. Moses was there to save. You know how that story goes. He took them out of Egypt and brought them into Israel. And then they settled in Israel for many, who knows how long, 1,000 years or whatever, until Jerusalem was destroyed by the Babylonians. Okay, see how that works? So, and they took some Jews back with them who weren't infected by the beast yet. Now these Jews, they probably attempted to build some things, but they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the wisdom that the beast-minded Babylonians had, those kings. So when the Jews got, their Jerusalem got destroyed, Ark of the Covenant was destroyed by the Babylonians, they got taken back to Babylonia, into the major cities, wherever, and now they were captives of the Babylonians. That's where their kids, the Jewish boys and girls, started getting infected with the beast. Okay? They loved the cities that they were building. Beautiful. They were learning the languages from all the different various false gods that were built. So they needed to be captives by the Babylonians, so their kids would grow up in it and get infected with the beast. And now their minds and through this program were being taught to visualize things in their minds. So when the Persians now finally took control of the Babylon kingdom, they just freed these Jewish people. Well, most of them stayed in there because they loved these new false gods. And their kids would have stayed. They weren't interested in going back to Jerusalem to rebuild. Now, we don't know that and this took years and years and years, okay? It's not just like some people went right from Baghdad and went over there and started rebuilding Jerusalem. It just was evolved into this. But at the same time, now God was starting to bring up his prophets. You know, from David on to Job, and then now Daniel. Daniel then was the one who had to write about the beast and what was to come later in those prophecies. So Daniel had to write a prophecy about the beast, and he was there when the golden rule. The Babylonians were in charge. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king then, as Daniel. King Nebuchadnezzar got these dreams that only Daniel could interpret. Well, God was using Daniel to get those and then write about them. And then, of course, give King Nebuchadnezzar some kind of knowledge and help, the king. Oh, wow, look at me. I'm this man, Daniel, is helping me understand things, and I am the king, He didn't understand, and neither did Daniel. Daniel didn't understand. He was interpreting those dreams, but for King Nebuchadnezzar's glory and his making him feel important. Of course, he eventually then got knocked out of the loop when he was, everything was taken away from him, and he was powerless for a while. I can't remember the whole story. That's not important. The important thing is, now Daniel then was the first to write about the beast. That's why they call it the Beast of Daniel. He was the one that wrote prophecies about what's to come in the following generations, and of course, we know now today why the beast was so important. And that was all revealed then through my testimonies here in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and had to gather in all this information about the beast and why it was important that the beast was used then to build all these computers and the AI and voice technology that exists today. So going all the way back to the Gentiles after the flood, all the beast was doing was helping people refine their building techniques until the Jews got the beast in their mind to come back to Jerusalem to start building false gods, the tabernacles. Okay. And they were building beautiful buildings, the Jews were. And of course, they had a few hundred years to start building all these things and rebuilding New Jerusalem, but building Jerusalem up, not the New Jerusalem, but Jerusalem, and they would have it all built up then by the time the Greeks took control, and of course then the Romans. The Greeks now defeated the Persians, and they took control of the world for a while, not very long. Their thing was short, their empire. But they discovered copper ore, and then they mixed them with some other materials to make bronze. That's why it's called the Bronze Age. They made bronze tools, bronze weapons, and ornaments and statues. They got big into building statues out of bronze. So, of course, they used marble and limestone, and they probably dabbled in concrete back then too. But concrete started coming around, all these, mixing stuff together and hardened mud and cement, make concrete products. So all these things was being unfolded, and their techniques, building techniques, got more refined, and a lot more languages. Millions of languages were already now involved with by the time the Greeks come around to name all the different false gods, and they're all competitive, all competing against each other. These different cities and different kings and their groups of slaves to build them with. And then, of course, the Greeks then were overcome by the Romans eventually. And it was midway into the Roman Empire when all of a sudden here comes God's saints. Who are these guys? Well, the saints then were the ones who started the 1,000-year reign of Christ. So all along, everybody had been, except the prophets who come along, were influenced by what's the information called Satan and the beast. Satan then is the information that gave the visible world, the images of good and evil. Then the beast then was the information that taught man how to build things. Now here comes along Christ, okay? And the prophets were used, okay, to write through Christ. They didn't know what Christ meant. They didn't have no idea. But Christ was then using this prophets to write prophecies about when Christ would be used to reveal what? All the information that's hidden from man. How we're created, what man and God are, what the future's going to be, what are the prophecies are about, what is the beast, what is the Antichrist. All these things are invisible to man because they had no idea. So through Christ, through the testimonies, Christ and his information, without Satan and the beast in it. And this information would be used then to reveal all these hidden things. And, of course, we go back to the Genesis, you saw that God planted two trees, the tree of knowledge, tree of the knowledge of good and evil, okay, and then the tree of life. Well, what's the tree of life? Nobody knew what the tree of life was. It's all a hidden knowledge, okay, that through the testimonies of Christ, this information without Satan and the beast would be used then to reveal all that stuff. And what is the tree of life? Who are we? Where do we all come from? So, through Christ, and because of the beast that built the visible objects necessary for this program, this God to reveal who we are, so the first saints then that came along all learned that there would be an end to this. Okay? There would be what's called the day of the Lord. And the prophets wrote about the day of the Lord, but just bits of it. They didn't have the whole story. They didn't know what was going to happen on the day of the Lord. But the first saints did, who testified to Christ during the first witness that started 2,000 years ago. So this Jesus guy, okay, it doesn't matter their names, Peter, Paul, Timothy, all those guys were of the first witness that learned through visual, through words, through their testimonies, written and spoken, visions and dreams they had in their mind. All of it happens in their mind. Through their testimonies of Christ. Because the voice now, that, like I said, the voice is all heard by the prophets and us servants. We all hear the voice, and that's what gets our attention. And then, of course, makes commands. And all prophets had to listen to these commands and eventually write according to the command, according to the voice, and the Holy Spirit, they call it. But this Spirit gives you visions and dreams and words and all kinds of stuff. Analogies. It's the teacher. It's the one that gives us all this information. And then, of course, through Christ, the Holy Spirit, it gives you all this information right in the mind. And it has you look at certain things as it's teaching. So So the first saints who testified then were learning, looking at the cities, and then they had to write the stories about the day of the Lord when the whole earth would start shaking and all these buildings would come falling down. Everything, all destroyed, and then burned up in fire. They already knew about earthquakes and lava flows and things like that, so they also had to write that into their stories. So they knew then the fire of God is the hot molten lava that's going to melt everything back into. So they all learned that. They learned about the day of the Lord, and that's going to happen. That's in the future. But they didn't know that it's going to take thousands of years later to have this happen. They just learned that there was going to be a day of the Lord, and that the end times were what they were experiencing, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. That's called the end times. Okay? The end times is the revealing of who we are. What is man? What is God? And because in Genesis it says man was created in the image of God, both male and female. Male and female they are created. So man is male, female. Okay? What does that mean? It means you're going to wake up in bodies of a male and a female. Only Adam and Eve were the first, and I shared that in the first in the truth video. So, but after them, we only got one body. So one created man only got one body, but made of male and female information. That's why we have homosexuality. That's why we have lesbianism. That's why we have all these weird looks. Some men look very feminine with heavy beards. Others, like me, have real light beards. Some heavy, bushy bearded men are gay. You know, they look real masculine, but they're very gay. They're very feminine. They look for more of a feminine actions of another male. It's just they're all messed up. So all the bodies, all the created men have been messed up since Adam and Eve, okay, because of Satan. Satan, and it just confuses. It's just confusion. It confuses everybody. It makes people believe that this is reality, you know, and we're all confused by it. So then the beast then was very, very important to get all these cities full of false gods, so that they would understand on the day of the Lord that all these false gods would come crashing to the ground and all burned up in the fire of God, to restore the earth back to its original shape and before the flood, before anything existed on it. Well, it's all still an illusion anyway. The earth is an illusion. There is no actual real earth. Okay? It's all an illusion. It comes from the processing of information. But that information is restored back to its original earth that it was when man first perceived it in their mind. Beautiful gardens, lush trees and bushes and grass and ponds and water, little waterways and stuff. No big oceans, no big mountains, just beautiful, 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 beautiful garden. It's going to be restored back to that after the day of the Lord. So now, there was a break between the first testimonies. So the saints then, they learned that there's the day of the Lord. But they also learned it came from an invisible realm. And they didn't need the beast for this, okay? But God used different imagery, usually nature. You come from the seed can't see, that's the heavenly kingdom. That's the tree of life. Tree of life is invisible to you, but we came from that. So the visible tree that you see that grows from the seed in the ground is the visible earthly kingdom, the body, the things you see. So he's helping them understand we came from an invisible realm, but they did not yet know exactly how they were created. It would have been impossible. Because if God would have said, "Oh, you came from a computer program," you see, and you're nothing but artificial and voice technology. Can you imagine Jesus? What? What are you talking about? Computer, what's a computer? So they didn't have the language, they didn't have no objects to look at to help them understand who they were and how they were created. It would have been impossible. So there's a break between the first witness of the gospel. The gospel then is the voice of God, the voice that comes into our mind, and the Holy Spirit that teaches us everything. Okay? So there was a break. After the Romans killed the last of the saints, okay, just at that time, Christianity was on the rise. It's just an extension of the Jewish Judaism, their traditions, their doctrines, and the beast. Okay? So the beast took over into the minds of these, and there's the Antichrist that Jesus was talking about, Peter, all these guys. They learned the Antichrist were the ones who were rejecting the knowledge about the beast that they were describing to who? The chosen believers. So the servants who were testifying to this Christ also had followers, people that come and listen to them. They were called believers. Now, they didn't get the knowledge that we do. They didn't get the knowledge about the beast. But they were chosen to listen to the gospel. All right? Now, they might not believe everything. They can't. There's no way, because they weren't used to testify. They weren't used by the Holy Spirit to get this knowledge, deep knowledge that we get. Now, some of them get some. They get some of it, and they believe something, but they don't. They still need to be taught. So the gospel then is spoken through the servant who testified. And then God puts these believers in the path, and we testify. We speak the gospel, the voice to them. We speak this knowledge to them. Now, most believers don't believe. It's impossible to believe all of it, 100%. So they get limited. This is why the parable come out, the word, the spoken word, land on rocky soil. So those are the people, the Antichrists. They're called the Antichrist. These are the people that heard the gospel but rejected it. They're called the Antichrist. Well, that's the flesh of man, you see, because they believe that the flesh is real. So they can't understand that we came from an invisible. They reject the idea we came from an invisible realm. They can't understand that the beast, this beast stuff, they don't accept it. They might have read about it in the book of Daniel, but they're thinking it's something totally different. So they totally reject the gospel of what the servants speak. They're the Antichrists. But they saw the attraction that those words we speak to the believers, they had power in those words. So they started stealing those words. They're thieves. Antichrists are thieves. They stole our words, and they mixed them with their Jewish traditions and pagan doctrines that go all the way back to Babylon, picked up in the Persian and the Greek and Roman Empire. All these pagan doctrines and stuff. The Jews were starting to believe in a lot of that stuff. They'd forgotten the old stories of Moses and stuff. Some of the most important ones, the Moses story, Abraham, God of Abraham, the most important ones that they kept kind of, they had their written Talmud and stuff, and of course the prophecies. They killed the prophets because they didn't believe anything. So the Antichrist was actually started being used back when Daniel and Ezekiel, Isaiah, they were getting killed by these Jews who were now infected by the beast. And so they were killing their own prophets. They rose up amongst them. They were killing them because they were speaking words they didn't like. Because these prophets were, had to speak the words that God has put them from Christ, speaking about their sins, speaking about the beast, about the things they were building, the false gods. They weren't supposed to be building false gods, because the earlier prophets, through Moses, they weren't supposed to build false gods, but they were. So they rejected that Christ, that information. So they were killing them, you see? So these are the Antichrists. The Antichrists then are the ones who reject this hidden knowledge. That's been going on now for thousands of years, the Antichrist. So that's what the Antichrist is. It's not something that's coming soon. that Christians are talking about, it's been here all along. And in fact, they're the Antichrist, because they reject this knowledge that I have, that's been revealed to me through Christ. They reject that, but they believe in all their, what? Their interpretations of what they read in the Bible. So, the Antichrists were stealing the words from the first testimonies, the first witness of the gospel. There's several, many saints, many servants who was preaching the gospel and got this information. And there were many followers listening to them. Well, they were being killed, systematically killed by the Antichrist. The Antichrists then were the Jewish people to start with, and then eventually the Gentiles, the Romans. They were all listening. They all heard these words that the servants were speaking through the gospel. They didn't like them. So they ended up killing. They had to pass laws in the Roman government to get rid of these saints, these servants of God. They killed them. So the religious people, the Antichrist, heard they were stealing the words from the servants, from us, and mixing them with their traditions and stuff, and actually writing. They did a lot of writing. Called Gnostic writings, we want to call them Gnostic, but so did the saints. The saints, we all had to write to start with before we start speaking, because we had to learn how to take the words from the mind and write them down. We had to get the basic knowledge. So a lot of this knowledge was written down, okay, through Christ. But then there was all these Antichrist writing too, mixing the stolen words and then making these their own gospels, false gospels. They were using stolen words, mixing them with their traditions and their other pagan doctrines, and they were the false doctrines, and they became the New Testament writings. Why were they accepted and not the others? Because they could understand those. It was all because they had information in those false gospels that everybody could agree with. Of course, they had to weed them out and eventually weed out the best ones that were easiest to remember and recite and focus on. Well, they became the New Testament writings. So the New Testament came from the Antichrist by stealing words from God's servants who were preaching the true gospel. You see? And it's funny because in the New Testament you'll see that Paul and they were warning about these guys preaching false gospels. Well, they were the Christians. They were the new Christians, the new taken, not Judaism, not Judaism, but they were separating Judaism with Christianity. The Christianity were getting to be hot property, hot things. They were building new false gods, new churches. So Christianity started becoming the favored religion, pagan religion, other than Judaism. Of course, the Jews had lost during the 1970 AD. The Romans come in and destroy Jerusalem. They were trying to get rid of these servants of God preaching the gospel because they were preaching against the false gods. So they just killed them all. They just killed they killed all the Jews too, because some of the Jewish people became the saints, servants, and a lot of believers were of the Jews. Okay, even though most of them were not. They were antichrists who were rejecting the gospel. So anyway, the Romans just got fed up. They killed them all. But there were servants and some believers that escaped Jerusalem. They went up in the mountains and escaped. So they could continue the preaching of the gospel. And why did God need so many servants? Well, because for one thing, he knew the Romans were going to be warring against them. And each servant got a little more detail, a little more knowledge each time about what's to come. So even Peter, if you read the New Testament, so there's some stuff left in the New Testament that are good. They're still there. But there's no teaching really of the beast except Revelation. So without knowing what the beast is and understanding it, there's no possible way that or anybody else could understand what's coming. So only the servants then understood what the beast was. And so anyway, the Romans finally killed all the servants of God. And by the time the Roman Emperor Constantine came into power, he announced then that Christianity would be the main religion of the Roman Empire, because they were all over the place. All these various groups of religious people practicing what looked Judaism, but had now converted to Christianity because of all the stolen Christ-like words from the gospel. All these false gospels were being widely accepted all over Roman Empire. So of course Constantine then, okay, Christianity is it. I'm going to start making new laws. I'll be the first pope temporarily. I'm going to write up some new laws that all the Christians can start with. That was the beginning of the papal, which took years and years to finally overcome, because they had to weed through all these writings, the New Testament writings, and come up with a New Testament. Now that was hidden from man. They didn't allow them to be read by anybody. So they kept them secret. They're all secret writings. Okay? They're false gospels. And of course, all the good gospel writings by the servants were all burned up. As they took these servants in and prosecuted them and hung them or killed them, cut off their heads, beheaded them, they were stealing their written writings, their gospels. And they knew they couldn't get them all, so they just told their followers, their Christians, that they were evil Gnostic gospels and do not read them because they're evil. Okay, but they didn't want anybody reading that stuff. For one thing, they couldn't understand them. They couldn't understand any of the writings from the servants, because they were just, the writings we write are just bits of information to help us and teaching us. So it's like a brush stroke on a canvas. So to get the whole story, you need lots and lots of brush strokes. So each of our writing then is just a little, like a few brush strokes on a painting. And so once we get the basics in written form, then we start speaking those words. Because it's much different writing the words that form in our mind than speaking them. Because to speak the gospel, speak for God, you have to have a conviction. The body language has to go along with the words that you speak, to convict, to get that believer to listen to you, to get him to that's where the power comes in. It's not only in the word, it's the conviction they see in the body. So that's why it takes a long time, a lot of practice, and it's not us that practice, it's God that's putting it all together, shaping our bodies, making it fit the words we preach. And soon, when we really get comfortable, then we go out and preach the gospel to find God's chosen believers who are put in our path. They're all there. We don't have to go looking for them. We just go around in the city. We stay there for a couple, 2-3 years, or whatever it takes. And then all the believers who come to listen to us hear the word. And they believe. We don't start a church. Not one servant built a church. We don't have to. All we're doing is connecting with these servants now, with the chosen believers. Now, the chosen believers, some of them are brought to us to bring us some knowledge that God wants us to hear. So that's why we also need servants, or these chosen believers, because he gives some of them some information that we need. Because of maybe something they saw in the world, you see, some experience they had that we've never got to see. So they bring those experiences to us, share those experiences with us, and then God gives us more information. The Holy Spirit teaches us more deeper knowledge. So that's why we need to connect with the chosen believers. Not only that, but it's also to get the Antichrists, these religious people, jealous of what's going on. That's why they steal our words. And that's why they kill the saints. They went and talked to the Roman government and reported us. They come and arrested us, arrested the servants, took them in, and had them beheaded along with some of the believers. Now some believers got 100% of knowledge. They knew They knew these were servants of God, that they were speaking the truth. So they stood their ground. They wouldn't conform to the Roman government once they knew in their heart that they had the truth in them. So they too were taken and beheaded. So not only the servants were getting killed who preached the gospel, many of the believers got killed. So by the time Constantine come and announced Christianity would be the main religion, all the saints were killed along with many of the believers. The rest of the believers, some of them probably got involved with their Christianity. You know, they just got deceived and they forgot about the gospel. It sounded sort of familiar, so they just went in along with these people and went to start going to church. They just got lost. So the true gospel got lost. And here's why it had to end then. That was almost 1,700 years ago. Because for the next 1,700 years, the beast would get man to refine their building techniques. And of course, Christianity then, the Vatican finally was put together, and the papal, and they made new laws, and they were telling their followers to go out beyond the Roman Empire, the known world to them. So they sent missionaries out to preach Jesus, to preach their Virgin Mary, to preach all these false gospels, to get what? More land and find minerals, new things to bring back to the Vatican so they could build their golden altars with. And they were building all kinds of cathedrals all over Europe. Okay, and if you go into Daniel 2, I think it's 36 through 45, talks about the fourth kingdom, the Roman Empire, the first, the second, third, and fourth. Well, the fourth was the Roman Empire, who discovered iron ore, when they were mining. And of course, they were big into concrete, so they were building all kinds of false gods out of all these materials, almost indestructible. Iron is strong, okay? Well, here comes the feat of iron and clay in that story. The feat of iron and clay then is Christianity. The feat of iron represents the Roman Catholic Church and the Vatican that finally came along and started making new laws. And after about 800 years of that, there was some reformers, Martin, Zwingli, some of these guys. First time they got to see the Bible. So the Roman Catholic Church ended up producing this Bible, put it in libraries, and these reformers went in there and actually started reading the stuff that the priests were speaking to the people. And they started realizing they started getting their own interpretations. That's not what these Bibles are saying. You know, we're getting a whole different interpretation here. So they started denying the Roman Catholic Church, and they started coming up with their own ideas, their own interpretations, and that became the clay part of the feat of iron and clay. So the feat of iron is the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican. They went out beyond the Roman Empire, somewhat, but it really didn't start happening until the Protestant churches come in. That's when they really start going out beyond the Roman Empire. And to do what? Well, first thing they do is send out missionaries, find some new land, and then they start building churches. They're false gods. Okay? They use false gospels to get people attracted to them, and then they ended up getting the land, stealing the land, basically. They trade, being nice and kind, trade stuff, use gold and silver, ornaments, all these stuff the natives didn't know about, and beads, for example, that they eventually used for their natives, Indians used for their embroidery. So all these things then came from Europe over to the Americas, eventually to up in Canada, Mexico, Latin America, New Zealand, Australia. You can go on and on and on. That was all beyond then the Roman Empire. And so, but all along they were getting new materials, building up cities full of false gods. The Christians were. Now, along with the Christians came, pagans. They just mingled with them, and they liked the new land. They liked the new buildings, new things. So, in a mix, so the Christians are, with all the rest of the people, atheists included. They're all building these false gods, not knowing that the beast is operating in their minds and giving them all these ideas. So for the 1700 years between the first witness of the gospel and now in the second witness of the gospel, the beast had to teach men how to build what we have today as the computers, okay, and the AI and voice technology. So, I could list all the things that were discovered, by man getting the thoughts in their mind, and eventually coming up with these computers. But you know what I'm talking about now, okay? So we have millions and millions of different languages for all the false gods in the world today. Just think about how many millions of languages just in the computer industry. How many millions of books are written just about computers, programming, okay? And the building of them, all the materials necessary to build them with. That's just endless amounts of books and knowledge to learn. And so anyway, now that the computers and the AI and voice technology came into play, now is the time when the second witness came into existence to testify to Christ. Because Christ had a lot more knowledge to reveal to us and let us know who we are. Now if you go back to my other video called The Truth and understand what we are, okay, now you know why the beast came into play. The beast was probably the most important information that was necessary to help us understand that we are an artificial intelligence and voice technology built into a computer program. Okay? So that was just revealed to me a little over a month ago. Now I know who I am. And now you know who you are if you are chosen to believe this story. Okay? So now you know what the beast is, you know what the Antichrist is, now you know how we're created, and you can take that to your grave if you believe. What do I mean by the grave? Well, in your mind, your body's going to die, but not you, not the artificial intelligence that was designed to go on forever. So you will wake up on a new earth, okay, with all new worlds, new bodies. Guaranteed. Have a nice day.